Good morning. I'm Angus. I'm the director of OutdoorArtsUK. I'm a white male in my, goodness Lord, my early 50s with a little bit of grey hair, and I'm sitting in front of some circus posters with dancing cats and trapeze artists. And my pronouns are he, him. So we are here for the second of our 3 refresh webinars for people working in outdoor arts this forthcoming summer. These came out of a survey that we did of our members and the outdoor sector of what people would like to have a quick reminder of, given that we have had a couple of years without doing what we do best in the outdoor sector and beyond. So last week we had a session with Lorna Rees of Gobbledygook Theatre and Andrew Loretto of Hat Fair, just looking at some of the basics of outdoor production. That is available online on our YouTube channel if you want to watch that. We also found it was quite interesting. We didn't quite necessarily predict this. We did focus quite a lot on kind of health and well-being of people working at the same time, because again, that with the sort of panic of getting out there, we'd slightly left some of that goes the wayside. So the second one, this again was as kind of requested in the survey by the membership, is about accessibility. And so we have, I'm just looking for, I'm missing someone, I think, in my site in my room here. Anyway, we certainly have Show from Stopgap and Martin from Tin Arts, who are going to talk to us about their work. And just like I say, these are quite light touch events. These are not meant to be your basic briefing on how to make an accessible piece of work or an accessible festival from scratch. These are just a few reminders of good practice from people who are pretty good at good practice in my experience. So first of all, I wonder if I could ask Show to talk to us. Show, if you just tell us a little bit about Stopgap, a company I know well and have worked with, you know, Show, it must be for about 15 years, which is a bit scary.
Yeah, something like that. Hello, I'm Show. I'm the executive producer of Stopgap Dance Company. I'm an East Asian male with round glasses with tied back hair. My pronouns are he, him, and I am sitting in front of a white wall. So a little bit about Stopgap. So we've been touring the outdoor circuits since 2008 or thereabouts. We've done various productions since, maybe 5 or 6 productions since 2008. And we also do indoor work, but I would say since we started touring outdoor work, it's about 50-50 split between indoor and outdoor work, I think. Yeah, and we are an inclusive dance company, so we have deaf, disabled and neurodivergent creatives and management team who work in the company. And we also have an extensive training program that nurtures the next generation of diverse dance artists. So is that enough as an introduction, Angus, do you think? Or?
I think that's great. And of course, people can follow up online. So I wonder if you could talk about leading this company for touring work, obviously with a focus on outdoors, though we have great respect for indoor work as well, and how you look after colleagues and artists, and both in preparation and on the road.
Yeah, sure. So on a day-to-day basis, our team have a dialogue with all of our dancers, whether disabled or not, to be really in tune with their various individual needs. We may ask and engage in direct conversations about making suggestions or figuring out access needs to incorporate in a day-to-day working. But sometimes the individuals might not know a particular need until something crops up. So being alert to these unexpected issues and being open-minded to make changes is really important. And I think that is very much the foundation of our inclusive culture and ways of working.
And I wonder if you could talk a little bit then about the kind of support you give to your artists on the road and how you work together as a company. One of the things I know from working with you is that you all look after each other. That's kind of key.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the interesting things that we've discovered in the last, well, we've been going for, as an organization, nearly 25 years. And the inclusive culture and practice has very much grown organically. And the knowledge and how to do this inclusive thinking has almost been passed on through osmosis in the past. But we're getting to a point now where we have a lot more people on the road and working in the organization. And also with the pandemic, remote working has become a lot more of the norm. So we can't now rely on that kind of learning by osmosis alone. So one of the things that we're implementing now actually is having a inclusive policy or guidelines that we can all kind of adhere to, that brings that inclusive thinking and culture together on paper that we can all refer to. So it's one of the developments that we're implementing at the moment. Yeah, but in terms of on the road, giving personalized access is very important. Each individual is very different. So, you know, some people might benefit from having a designated access worker on the road, or some might want more subtle support, such as a touring manager sort of dipping in and out on an ad hoc basis to provide physical access to certain things. But everyone sort of embracing an inclusive culture means that a work ethic is good in terms of looking out for each other, and then being attuned and aware to those unexpected access issues, and then being able to problem solve and get in with each other. And I would say that you might think that disabled dancers are the ones who need a lot of support, but actually individual needs are quite unique. We also tour with people who have caring needs, etc. And having that kind of inclusive mindset allows us to be really open-minded and attuned to individual needs and catering for their needs to make sure that they can work equally and to their full potential.
Right. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you communicate the company's needs with the festivals that you're visiting. Yeah,
sure. So in our tech rider that we circulate, we also have quite an extensive access needs in there as well. You know, kind of quite obvious things like having wheelchair accessible dressing room and things like that. And the list and requests of things have grown over the years as we learn more about what it takes to do outdoor work, and it's become a lot more detailed as well. So as a first point of contact with the festivals who inquire, we send those documents out. And in that document, it says quite specifically that these are a sort of things that we require. But from experience, I know that different outdoor festivals work in different ways and have different budgetary pressures and setups and programming. So we stipulate in there that we would like to have a conversation about what works for the festival. The ones that we've been to before are obviously a lot easier because they know what to expect and we know what to expect. But we always encourage festivals to engage in a dialogue with us to just check in and ask any questions about the technical rider that we have and the access needs there. And then one kind of big stipulation we have is that we ask for quite a generous amount of tech and run-through time for a relatively low tech, almost like a pop-up sort of standard street performance. The reason why we do that is because an inclusive company is dealing with quite a lot bigger variables. So different surface textures of performance space could have quite a big impact on how wheelchair dancers travel in the space, for example. And there are also quite a big orientation and distraction issues to think about for learning disabled dancers. So spending a really decent amount of time in that performance space before our first show is really important to make sure all of those nitty-gritty and subtle access needs are ironed out. And also, you know, we might need to make some adaptation to the repertoire as well if the issues are quite big to deal with. But having those a large amount of prep time in the space is also quite good for us in terms of if we have sudden illnesses or injuries on the day, then we have also 2 access workers who tour with us as understudies as well. So if we have to slot those people in, it gives us time to make sure that they're ready. But also, if any of the performers are not able to perform at all, we have sort of planned A, B, C, and D within the repertoire to make sure that we can still present something that is of high quality, even with a little bit of different casting. So having that kind of chunk of time for an organization that has a lot bigger variable than some others just allows us to make sure that we can present as good a work as possible. But again, we say in the rider that we'd like to engage in a conversation, and we will take as much time as we can within the schedule that the festivals have to work with. So it's always a constant dialogue about detail.
And there must be a lot of questions, sorry, I'm just coming off a bit, about compromise here, because I think it was, actually I shouldn't say the festival, there was one time I saw you guys performing, and I think it was, is it, how do you say it, Nadine?
Nadan, yeah.
Nadan. And he and I just had a little laugh, and he said, well, it's completely accessible, but the space is terrible. And it was actually, it was completely accessible, but it just wasn't right for the show. It just didn't fit. You couldn't really get the audience in the right place. But I guess that the festival was sort of feeling rather thrilled that they were, oh, look, everyone can get in and everything. But it just was an ugly bit of street outside of Primark or something that didn't suit the show.
Yeah, as much as possible, we do ask whether we can do a recce, but obviously it's logistical issues from our end too, because we can't recce at every single place we go to. But yeah, it's, I mean, one of the top tips I was going to say at the end was if you were programming and you were inviting an inclusive company or disabled artists, a good thing to think about is after having a conversation with us and finding out more about who we're bringing and their needs and perspectives, just putting yourselves in the shoes of people with specific access or requirements or preferences, and then just go through the day-to-day or like the journey of get in and get out and see what kind of issues there might be and how they might be depicted or presented in a certain performance space as well. And then just kind of like sense checking and thinking about whether it's appropriate or not. And if you have any questions, then you come back to us and then ask questions further.
You know, one of the first times I ever worked with a disabled company was with yourselves. And I remember it was your Laura who didn't say get in my shoes, she said get in my chair. And it was absolutely brilliant. And it has affected my programming work ever since, because even though I don't do it every time, it just doing that imaginative leap once was the reminder that I always need. And I still get it wrong, but yeah. So I remember you, I'm very grateful for that. Anyway, sorry, moving back on, and save your top tips at the end, my friend. What's the kind of good stuff that a festival will offer you that kind of takes it above and beyond?
I think generally we find that if we've had a really in-depth and a meaningful conversation with festivals, we tend to have a really good time because you know, everything we asked for has been provided and a journey has been sort of considered. And obviously we will do our own internal thinking about how to make sure our staff and touring team are sort of their kind of arc of journey within that festival too. So so in some ways, if we've had that conversation with festivals, it tends to be a lot smoother. Yeah.
Great. And I wonder if you could sort of give us a bit of an anecdotal example of a good festival experience that we could kind of go, oh, that sounds like good practice.
Yeah, I think being offered to do a recce is always good when possible. And for those places that's quite difficult for us to get to distance-wise, then making that time for us to check the space the night before, because, you know, if it's far, we'll be traveling the day before anyway. So we tend to arrive around sort of late afternoon period. So if there was opportunity for us to go and see the space and, you know, just sense check, then that's always useful. But also for those places we can't do recce's much in advance, then we always ask them to just think about alternative spaces in case that isn't suitable. So I tend to sort of ask for 2 or 3 alternative spaces if we're not so sure whether the space they've allocated in the first instance is suitable. So yeah, that's always quite good.
So have you ever had it where you've got somewhere and you kind of had to say, look, we just can't do it here, and the festival has managed to find you somewhere that you could?
Yeah. I mean, I also understand that each festival is working with the constraints of local authorities who all work very differently in terms of permission and licensing. So yeah, it's always a negotiation. But in some instances, you know, we've directly got involved with talking to the council to seek permission or things like that, and just kind of put in a case of why the change is needed, or those provisions needed to be presented. It's sometimes better or more effective if it comes from the touring artists, I think.
Sorry, great. And any horrors that you can share without naming names?
Yeah, I think one probably is we stipulate in the rider that we don't like to perform on dance floor because one, I mean, you might think it's useful for dance companies, but particularly if it rains or it's a bit damp, it just becomes a real hazard for all our dancers, but particularly wheelchair dancers who have a lot less control with their sort of forward motions. And then one festival laid it down anyway, but dance floors also have very different types, and the worst possible one is one of those really squidgy ones, which probably are quite good for like acrobats and things, but for wheelchair dancers it's an absolute no-no, because when it's really squidgy, it's even harder to wheel on it because there's a lot of resistance and bounce. So it meant that there was a extensive discussion between us, the wheelchair dancer, and the festival about what to do about this. And then in the end, we were able to do one show, but the wheelchair dancer was just exhausted after that. And we knew that that was going to be the case. So we were due to do 2 performances, but we could only do one. But you know, like I was prepared to pull the show, but you know, having traveled all the way to the festival, the wheelchair dancer did want to perform. So he was very generous to make concessions to do at least one show. But yeah, again, it kind of like, if there are any sort of changes to what we've agreed or what we said in the rider, again, it's just always good to just check in, because the minutest changes could have quite a big impact on inclusive companies.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, the dance floor issue is one with every China dance company. If you get certain South Asian dancers, they need to dance barefoot and they can't do it on a floor that will retain the heat. There are so many variables. I do remember doing dance festivals where the floor was up, the floor was down, the acro floor came in, the acro floor came out. It's yeah. But I mean, that clarity of information is completely what it's about. That's a brilliant show. We'll come back to you shortly. Lots there to think about. Thank you kindly. I'm going to move on now to Martin, if I may. Martin of Tin Arts. And Martin, last time I tried to do this to someone else, they put me on mute. So I just want to congratulate you in a room on your MBE that was recently awarded for your work. I think it's great that people doing the kind of work you're doing are acknowledged in that way. And it's great for you, but it's also great for the sector. So on behalf of the sector, hurrah and well done. And I hope you have a nice time when you go and get it. But moving on to other matters, if I may. Thank you. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about Tin Arts and your festival as well, please.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Martin Wilson. I'm a white male, just in my 50s, beard, black glasses, not a lot of hair. And my pronouns are he, him, and I'm sat in an office with green wall and shelves behind me. I'm the director of Tin Arts. We're an inclusive dance organisation based in Durham in the northeast of England. And we run dance activities, training programmes in schools, communities, and our own space. We create work for national and international touring, and we also curate our own events and festivals that we feel addresses certain needs that aren't met, particularly around outdoor arts.
Great, and I'm sort of, you're kind of brilliantly straddling the festival programming and the creative side as well. I wonder if I could just talk a little bit about the festival first, just talk a little bit about programming, perhaps a little bit more clarity on on who it's aimed at would be quite useful, but then who takes part in it. And I guess I've never been to it, but I've seen your work in other contexts, not least Spain, bizarrely, but yeah.
Yeah. Where dance floors get very hot, I must say.
And how?
So the particular festival I was going to talk about today really is something called IncludFest. And it springs back to 2013 when a group of young people and parents taught us about how they don't go to outdoor arts festivals for a range of reasons. One, because the physical access around those, which has evolved much better over the last 9 years, but the physical access was difficult and the content was not there for them. They didn't feel there was things they could engage with and get involved with. So we created IncludFest, which essentially is an inclusive, accessible outdoor festival, primarily for deaf and disabled children and people and their families, and it takes place every year over a day. And we take over, we have a lot of parks in County Durham, so we take over a park and we have a very wide footprint, and we program performances, activities to join in with, and lots of other things around a large park. So there's lots of space and places between the pieces itself as well. Would you like me to talk a bit about how we, I was going to talk a bit about how we work with artists, program work into the festival. Is that a good place to start?
That would be great. And I think it's interesting the context you're talking about there of a festival in a park, because I'm sort of thinking, well, my Twitter feed is full of Glastonbury at the moment, which is a very different kind of festival setup with a very different set of needs. So I just kind of, that context is quite useful. But yes, if you could, that'd be
great. Okay. So there's a number of things that happen within our IncludFest. So in terms of, there are some things that are constant. We won't run our IncludFest unless we can do certain things. So top tip, if you need a portable mobile hoist, then a company called Mobiloo can travel to anywhere in a company, and they can transform a place that's inaccessible around support needs and toilets into a completely accessible place. So Mobiloo is a top tip. I should have saved at the end, but I'll put it there. So we always do it fast. We always want to make sure there's quiet spaces, but a lot of our work with companies, I've kind of noted down 4 key things. This mirrors a lot of what shows on that. We want a conversation. We don't want an email correspondence. We don't want companies to throw their stuff at us and go, this is our show, will you book it? Because that's not very useful to us. We want to have a conversation. We want to understand a few things. First of all, we want to understand how adaptable or fixed is the work, because we have a particular audience in particular spaces. Some of our audiences will engage with work, but maybe not for too long. Maybe the sound and music levels around the piece need to be slightly adapted. Maybe we need to look at the language and dialogue in work and the content of that work. Maybe it's about the distance the audience are away from that, because some young people like to watch the work from quite a distance. So all these things, so we want to have a conversation about how adaptable the work is. And we're not asking people to kind of compromise on the artistic integrity of the work or the intention of the work, but we just want to know whether it's an actual fixed piece, whether we can have a conversation about the content and accessible around that piece. And we will provide artistic and other support around that work to help that piece become adaptable. And hopefully that will be useful back to the company as well, actually, because it's almost like a CPD back to help them look at how that work is adaptable. So how adaptable is the work is something we're quite interested in. How much information can they give us before the event to share with those who are attending the event? So everybody who comes to IncludFest, audiences and artists, are encouraged to share information and to be clear and articulate about what their needs are and what they're looking for and what will be there. So familiarity is a really big thing for us. So if we can have headshots of dancers and artists, if we can have a sample of the music to share with, if we can have words or lyrics from something, as much stuff as we can have, we will feed that out to those people who are going to attend. And a lot of parents and families do look over and work over that information. So when young people come, they're really familiar with what they're going to see. They have to choose, because we have lots of things running at the same time, so they have to choose what their journey. And we have particular pieces which are BSL interpreted through the day, so they can choose that journey as well. But essentially, as much information can, as a context, we have about between 1,000 to 2,000 people attending across the day, and it's about a 5 or 6 hour day. So there's a drip of people moving constantly, which is quite a lot of people to engage with. But the more information we have, the more we can share with people, and the more people will feel confident and familiar to come and see the work as well. And what it does, I think, it makes companies stop and think about, how do we describe what we do? And how much do we get lost in the world of arts and culture language? And how much do we talk to audiences about who they generally are and what they would connect with, actually? So we look at that information as much as we can. We offer training support. So as I said before, we will work with any company and actually, generally we get to work with them at the end when they've made the piece and they're looking to retrofit it and retro adapt it. I would recommend that you start that process much earlier, and you do that before you even start. And companies like ours, I'm sure people like Show as well, we're there to be approached and talked to about how to look at adaptation and making work inclusive and accessible. But we offer, if a company has made that work and they're bringing that work with us, then we will work with them on what information can we create. Can we create an easy read visual story of their piece so people can have that before they come? Can we look at the sound? Can we look at BSL interpretation? Is BSL interpretation going to be somebody stood at the side, or they're going to be slightly more integrated into the piece, and we can work within that? So we can do all those things, and that's a free service, because we want to. Everybody comes to our event, we want them to have the best experience. So we will do that with companies and work a lot around that to understand how best they can adapt that. And the fourth thing is we call them access riders here, but it's about everybody who attends. What do you need us to do to give you the best experience of IncludFest? And that is inclusive of the performers, the production team, the supporters, audiences. Everybody has a set of needs and a set of ways of working. And as an interesting kind of side example, in Tin Arts, internally, we have a set of access forms that we all have. So I have one, and mine says on it that I'm a particular problem with time. If something doesn't start at the time it's meant to start at, I can have anxieties around that, because my days are too crammed. That's my own problem, actually. So we're all very aware of each other's needs. So some of these things are around physical access and support needs, but some of the things are just about how we are as people and individuals, and the things that give us anxiety. So we welcome companies to share that with us, and it can be what time of day they like to perform, or they like to. And Show mentioned it before. Give yourself enough time and space, and ask for the time and space. We can give companies hours and hours of time in a particular area to rehearse, to get ready, to prepare, to test. We can change that stuff. We welcome what Show said about, come to us with 2 or 3 ideas about where it could go. But if we have had conversations on Zoom, using Teams, and not email correspondence, there's a much better chance we've got a good relationship where we can adapt and change it. So that kind of ongoing dialogue and adaptation. Those are the kind of core things that we find work well when we bring in work. The other thing I would just say as a context, and it might be I don't profile our event enough. We don't receive enough offers of work which we feel has been thought about in terms of inclusion and content access. We don't have enough work to draw from at the moment, and that might also be slightly pandemic-y, but there's not a lot of work being made in that way, actually. Yeah, so I think those are my core things. That's okay for that bit.
That's great. I just to kind of to pull that apart a little bit more, I'm quite interested in what you might be looking for in terms of work that is adaptable, that hasn't necessarily got it embedded. I can't think there are too many companies who would resist that hugely. But for example, the dialogue heavy shows, do you find that they're less attractive to you than the easily visual ones, or ones that don't have too many explosions and bangs? What are some of those criteria?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, actually, the latter thing, the sound and the level. Some work is amazing. I do a lot of work in Stockton, and we see each other in Stockton most years, actually. And Stockton is an amazing place, but it's a big bang place. There's a lot of work which is big, and it's fireworks, and people love it in Stockton. It's almost the antithesis of what we might be looking for slightly, because it doesn't allow people to come close by. So something that essentially is too loud. It's just about, can the adaptation be about we scale down the music? Essentially, can we pull back that and we pull this? So there's stuff like that. Dialogue is a really interesting collaboration conversation, because sometimes it's about working out what is the key dialogue that must be retained and without which the narrative doesn't work, and where sometimes as the dialogue got a bit complicated and heavy, and is color and texture, that our audience might lose themselves in that dialogue. So how can we simplify those things down? But as I said before, it's such a bespoke conversation, because I would never want anybody to compromise. I know the blood, sweat and tears that goes into creation of work. And the last thing you want to do is someone turn around and going, "No, you can't keep that in your work. It's not good enough for us." And it's not that at all. It's just about thinking about the audience. And we're also not asking people to change that piece forever. We're asking for an adapted version of it that could be appropriate for our space. And time is the other thing. I mean, 20, 25-minute outdoor piece of work, fantastic. Something that stretches 35, 40 minutes, that's quite a marathon in the hot sun for young people. So it's about time and scale. and can a piece be even broken up into sections? Can we do it in parts throughout the day? So we're not asking you to change it, we just ask people to kind of view it as chapters or something like that. And that does ask questions around how you retain audience. But certainly sound, certainly dialogue, and length are the three things we seem to have most. And the fourth thing is actually, which is a very Jeremy Shine kind of thing, how much infrastructure do you want? Because if you want big stages and big PA systems and big stuff, we're not the festival for you, because we're trying to sit within a park and look like we sit in a park as well.
I think sorry, I was muted. I think that's just about the honesty in terms of the programming, of saying actually that's not for us. And I think, you know, look, it's quite a brave thing sometimes for a company to say, because they might lose a gig. But you know, and for a festival to say that. Great. Martin, can I ask you to talk a little bit about the role of stewards and volunteers?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely crucial and massive. So what we have done over our years is curate a group of people who we bring in every year. So we are less leaning towards your bought-in, hired hand stewards. Obviously the context there being, we need about 15 to 20 stewards every year. We don't need hundreds. If we needed hundreds, this is not possible to actually curate that many people. But the stewards, so we have a stewards and volunteers. Our festival this year is in September. We start talking and have conversations, paid conversations, in June. So we start looking at the program together. We want everyone to understand what the program is, what we think is coming through, what we're going to do, and where it's going to be in the space and place. Very much co-production, so stewards have as much say in what's happening and how we're going to talk about things as anybody else. There's no hierarchy in our kind of outdoor festival world. And what we encourage with our stewards and volunteers is to have a listening approach. Just listen to the question or listen to the inquiry, and let's work it out together. Not everybody can be the expert of everything, and we don't expect people to learn all that stuff. But together as a collective team, we will share information. Obviously, there's really big handbooks around there, but the early induction training to make sure that people know what Mobiloo is, to make sure they know where BSL is, to make sure they know what is possible, so they know that a certain piece is going to come in. And we've worked out with the company, and you could sit 5 yards from it, but we've also got some really interesting viewpoints that are 50 yards away from it. And we've projected the sound in a certain way so it can be heard over there as well. So making sure the stewards know, and I think, you know, before we asked show about bad examples, the worst examples of stuff when I've met stewards in festivals is when they just turn around and go, haven't got a clue. I don't know what this is we're even watching. I have no idea what this is. And I understand that that's the larger festivals where you just have to bring people in and they turn up in the morning and that's who you've got. But that's not great for our audience, because they want a familiar, friendly face wherever they go. So the more informed, and our stewards come from all walks of life, not particularly cultural creatives, or they're just volunteers from other community events. A lot of them work at Brass in Durham or Lumiere with us. So they come from all kind of, there's a kind of hub in Durham we can draw on. Yeah, but informed and able to, the last thing is we encourage our stewards to point at stuff and flag it up. So to come to me and go, right, I've seen something, I think we can do better than that. Can we adapt that now? Can we change that space? Can we move that gazebo from there to there? Absolutely. There's not that hierarchy doesn't exist where they go, no, I've set that on my risk assessment, that's what we're doing. There's a much more open, collaborative approach with all our stewards about how we can run it better. That's
just good stewarding, in my view.
So far,
empowering your stewards. Yeah. One of the big things was that if you see a decision that's going to be is better for the audience, is take it and don't wait to get clearance. Just get on with it. Just do it, and it just makes for a better program. An anecdotal example, if you wouldn't mind, Martin, of something really good festival-wise for you.
So anecdotal example. Oh God, I can't remember the year because the pandemic has made a mess of my sense of years. But I was down at Greenwich, and it inspired something I've done at IncludFest ever since. We went to see a Grey Eye piece. You might remember it. They were up on the large picture scaffold, and it was at the Queen's Parky place. Anyway, what they had was, there was an audience place and there was a designated accessible area where wheelchair users or those with mobility issues could make sure they get a really good view of the piece and were not behind everybody else who could move there quicker. So it's a designated space. So ever since there, if you come to IncludFest, at every performance or every craft activity or whatever it is you're doing, we call it the empty space. there is always space for somebody there to come and join who has access or wheelchair issues. There is always reserved there. Often it's not used and it's not utilized, but it's there and it's always there. All our pieces have to program it in. And I also think it's quite an interesting signifier for those who don't require that space to think about, why is that space there? And so that's Grey Eye have done a lot of stuff which is worth looking at, and any outdoor work is great to go and see from Grey Eye as well.
And Greenwich is pretty good in terms of, I've learned a lot from visiting Greenwich, things like you talk a little bit about the suitability of work. They have different trails that you follow a sign for, this is the one that will be suitable for deaf audience. This is the one, and then the thematic here is the dance trail, but they also include that there, which I think is actually just very useful for all of us. Great, thank you, Martin. I'm going to move on, if I may, now to Rachel from Deaf Explorer. Rachel, good morning, how are you?
Good morning, hello everyone. I just want to apologise that I've had a bit of technical issues this morning and I might have some background noise. So if it becomes unbearable, do let me know, and I will put my email address in the chat to pick up on conversations just in case it is a bit impossible. I do apologise.
There's a slight echo, but it's fine. It's just about, it's fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's yes. There's so much going on in Birmingham at the moment. We've got Birmingham International Dance Festival, we've got the Commonwealth Games Festival, so things are just coming at us fast and furious. So I apologise for not being.
Well, I saw you last weekend dodging the rain, yeah. So that was good.
Fantastic. So
tell us a bit about Deaf Explorer.
Yeah, I'll start with Deaf Explorer. Just looking at my briefing notes. So Deaf Explorer, we are a very small little company. So there's myself and Alan McLean as founding directors of Deaf Explorer. Alan is an artist, has been working in disabled spaces for years and years and years. He's also an incredible bid writer and does our operations and development work. I guess I'm sort of technically the CEO, but I don't feel that comfortable with that as a hearing person. And so we're kind of working these things out, but we're very small. We are based in Birmingham, and our remit is that we support profoundly deaf artists mainly, but other hard of hearing artists who don't use British Sign Language are in our portfolio, but we mainly support sign language using deaf artists to access mainstream opportunities, to make connections in the mainstream, and to get their work that's usually just in the kind of deaf art ecosystem, actually bring that into the mainstream spaces. But it also needs scaffolding, it also needs support from mainstream artists who've had more opportunities, more training and more experiences as hearing people. And sometimes even other disabled artists who've not had the communication barriers that our deaf artists have had. We need support to really elevate deaf artists to help them achieve their full potential, because there's often gaps missing in training and education, but there's often rough diamonds in the community, so it's just pulling that out and giving them platform, really. So that's our remit.
So just perhaps we could grab some of the basics of making a performance accessible for audiences, and then we'll perhaps come back to the artist's question. Okay,
so in terms of audiences, I mean, we think a lot about our deaf audiences and deaf audience development, and really the key, if you want to bring in deaf audiences, there's no way about it. You need to book deaf artists, and you need to promote that, and you need to platform that with sign language, captions, a lot of advanced marketing. We use a lot of kind of our friends in the deaf community, deaf ambassadors, who will actually kind of promote things for us. We've got a lot of friends in the community that will share our information through social media. Deaf community works on word of mouth primarily, and a lot through Facebook and social media, but through the deaf community through social media. So it is a hard to reach community, and even though we are in the community, it's still really hard to reach deaf people. So in terms of making events accessible, I always come from it that if you book deaf artists, everything else can follow, because you can then think about the social media outreach for that. You then think about access on the site. Are there signs? Is everything easy read? Because easy read will cover people with learning disability, it will cover deaf people. So easy read is your friend. and just making things really accessible. And I guess there is a whole another level about, do your volunteers have basic sign language? I think we have to be careful about expectations. I can't expect my volunteers to be, I wouldn't expect people to be fluent in sign language, but maybe just enough to pull out a piece of paper, or enough to pull out their phone to write a message, or to have information to hand, to know some basic things. Just really simple things like toilets, interpreter, to have an information stand where they can go, where they know an interpreter will be, so they can answer all their questions, or there's iPads that are accessing online interpreters so they can communicate that way. There are lots of, technology is brilliant now, so there's lots of ways we can work with communication through technology, and it's just working out whether there's connectivity issues. There are ways of making things really accessible. That it's the message. You can do everything and make this incredible accessible event, but if deaf people don't know about it, they won't know whether to come.
That's great. I wonder, could I just ask you to just say easy reader? Could you just explain for those who don't know?
So easy read. So we look a lot at levels of language and making information as simple as possible and as jargon free as possible. So really look at the information that you're putting out, really strip out unnecessary words. And we do a lot, we pass information around the office. We're really lucky because we have an amazing deaf staff member that we put information in front of her, and she's actually a refugee. So she's only been in the UK 5 years and learned English and British Sign Language. So she's like our perfect litmus test. If she doesn't get it, we definitely know the community won't get it.
Great, thank you. I think it's really interesting the point you make about the communication, because in fact you and I have worked together, but it was through you as a hearing person to me as another hearing person that we actually managed to connect, because I'm forever on Zoom and just kind of assume it's wonderfully accessible now, and it's not, and it was really good to articulate that. I wonder now if you just wouldn't mind talking, because it does sound like there's a riot going on behind you, which I'm sure is all creative, and that's great. But I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about access for artists in productions.
Absolutely. Sorry, it's Little Amal, the Syrian refugee puppet, is in Birmingham City Centre today.
Oh, we love Little Amal. God, yeah.
Yeah. So and it's there's loads of companies that we work with, so it's a networking thing, and unfortunately it's just all clashed at the same time, so I do apologise. So I'm trying to do two things at once. So in terms of deaf artists, because we're so new, and deaf artists do make work, but they don't know. A lot of the time, deaf artists won't know where to go to sell their work. They wouldn't know where to show their work. They also wouldn't think about making their work accessible for mainstream, potentially, if they usually tour in the deaf community. So a lot of what we're starting to do would only just started to work in the outdoor space in the last year, so post-COVID. And the two shows that we've made for the outdoor space are both dance shows, so we're working with deaf dance artists. But we're still the bridge, so everything comes through us, all bookings come through us. We're trying very hard to take our work out. Our work's very visual. Sorry, Angus, I totally lost the question, sorry. What did you ask me?
It was just about how artists making work accessible for the artists. But I think you're making a good point about booking into mainstream festivals. And I'm going to go straight back. Show knows the story, I'll say, which was years ago when I worked with Stopgap, and we had a disabled arts part of the program. And I remember it was more the company said, can't we just go into the dance bit? We're dancers. And it was so clear, it was so beautifully articulated. From there on in, I think we put you in the dance bit of the festival, not in the disability arts bit. And I think that was a great lesson that I had as a programmer. And I think you're identifying something similar there, Rachael.
I believe so. I mean, we talk a lot about British Sign Language. The deaf community don't really identify as a disabled community. They identify as a language minority. So with a distinct culture, a distinct language, and a distinct a very distinct culture. So though deaf people understand that they're in disabled spaces, they're often programmed in disabled spaces. they consider themselves a language minority. And the other thing that I'm finding quite interesting at the moment and frustrating is that here I feel, I'm speaking very candidly, that my artists are still being lumped with participatory work. So, for example, well, not to name names, but big festivals going on at the moment in Birmingham, and my artists are not getting mainstream commissions. They're getting some participatory commissions. They're put on, they're programmed at the same time as participatory other, young people's companies, things like that, participatory work. So I've still got a long way to go to persuade festivals and large organisations that actually, if you're disabled or deaf, please don't just lump us with participatory community work. There are artists making professional standard work that's really, really good, and that there is work out there to programme.
We're into a whole other area here, Rachel, of the outdoor world being seen as simply participatory and not professional. And I've got to say, my experience on the Jubilee parade, where it was lovely. I kept saying hello to people in the parade, and eventually people around me said, "Who are you? What do you know?" And they were saying, "Well, all these volunteers, they don't get paid for this, do they?" And I was saying, "Yes, they do." And I realised the degree to which we even have to articulate that we make professional work outdoors, let alone the deaf or disabled community. It's kind of beyond that. It's brilliant. You've got little Amal, and I can sense the excitement. It's a beautiful thing. I saw her in Manchester on Sunday, I guess, in the parade there. So that's great. Lovely. I'm just going to see. I'm going to move on to gallery view and just see. Has anybody got any questions? Give me a wave, or stick them in chat, or use the one of the little hands. I'm quite happy to any way of indicating if anyone's got a question they'd like to put to any of our panel to reflect upon. You've covered it all, my friends. You've covered it all. Cool. Right. I'm going to do my little top tips, if I may. So, Show, you've given a one away. Show, what's your top tips? Easy access. Summer's coming. We've not done enough prep. What are we going to do quickly?
Yeah. So, top tips. You can probably guess. I think engaging in a dialogue with artists or visiting companies, just speak to us and find out more about what we need and how we can work with you. Second tip is be open-minded. We have a lot of knowledge, but also we do understand the context in which you're working with. So it's always a dialogue to find the optimum solution to our requests. And then the third one I've already said, which is put yourself in our perspective and the individuals. Once you've engaged in a dialogue with us, you will probably find that you have a little bit more knowledge to imagine what a journey might be from start to end of your festival. So it's more likely that you would spot potential issues, which raises more questions for you to come back to us with. Yeah, they're the three.
Literally stick your producer in the wheelchair and just make them do it and see what it's like. It was from the Wheelabouts. They put me in an electric wheelchair that I then crashed, so that wasn't so good, and that was in a field festival, but it was a good experience to have. Great, thank you, Show. Martin, what might you have to share? Our top tips as we go into the season.
3 top tips. So the first one might be not so useful this summer, but future-proof as opposed to retrofit. Start thinking about inclusion access from the outset of pieces as opposed to trying to do it afterwards. Think about any assets you have developed through the piece, be it things that people can touch, can see, can look at, anything that tells a story of how the piece is made and who will be in the piece, performers, and because festivals and programs, they love that stuff, they love sharing that stuff, and also that'd be great. And the third one is be open to and invite others' opinion. You can't be the expert of everything, and so making assumptions and second guessing around access probably isn't very useful. There are lots of great people such as Rachel, such as Show, who can help you with these things. And so there's a great community out there. Ask questions and people will help.
This is very true. It's totally my experience. Thank you, Martin. Rachel, if you're still with us, have you got any top tips you could share?
My top tips would be for deaf, so in terms of deaf audience accessing events and work, I think my top tip is work needs to be really visual. The less spoken word, the better. So the more visual your work is, the more accessible it is to the deaf community, the more you're likely to get the deaf community coming and watching. I see time and time again people booking BSL interpreters to shows that have got no deaf actors or involvement, and they are all just talk, just literally dialogue without any action, physical movement. It's all about the visual for deaf audiences.
That's great. That's very basic, actually, and really lovely. Great. That's lovely. This isn't quite a top tip, but it's something that actually the building I'm in an office with is with Attitude is Everything, who are a really useful resource if you don't know them. And we have, you know what, I can't quite remember where it is on the website. I'm so sorry, because it's quite a new website, but we have an access guide to outdoor arts. It's some of it, the legality of it is a bit out of date. We're planning a refresh in the next period, but it's still quite a useful document. But Attitude is Everything, who are all at Glastonbury at the moment. But it was Suzanne Bull, the CEO and founder of Attitude, who, when I first worked with her at the festival at the National Theatre that I used to produce, and it was all new to me, and I was like, oh my God, we're not going to manage that. She said, just do what you can, do something rather than nothing. Don't let perfection become an excuse for inertia. And I've kind of always gone along with that, is actually also, as a producer, as an artist, as a company, you are going to fail. As you know, Martin said, you can't be an expert on everything. And I think get it wrong and you learn a lot more, and you start having the dialogue, you know, which I've had with all of our panelists today over the years, one way or another. So I do think that is the way to learn and move ahead. In terms of this, like I say, is not meant to be the future-proofing point is really important one, Martin. And I'm not in any way saying that a quick hour on Zoom in any way makes up for that. But I just kind of want to flag up ahead is that part of our ongoing program will be to focus one of our main conferences on this subject in terms of the creative output as much as the practicality. I don't want to do another big thing on how to make it accessible. I just want to talk about the creative advantages, which is what actually the artists have taught me over the years. But we will be looking at that properly as part of our ongoing program in the next MPO round. It's very much there in the Arts Council investment principles, but actually just kind of in our hearts as well. So thank you very much to Sho and to Martin and to Rachel. That is just a little reminder, I hope, of some of the things we can do. And one way or another, I'll see you all out there. Rachel, are you in Birmingham at the weekend? I'm fingers crossed I'll be up there.
Sunday. I'm around all Sunday.
Lovely. I'll be there.
Brilliant. Yeah,
and Martin, I'll probably see in Stockton, and Sho, I know we'll see each other somewhere on the road. That'd be great. We have one more of these, again, light touch about environmental matters. So that's next Thursday at 11 o'clock again. That you can find that on the website. As you can, some of our resources and indeed joining information, if you're not a member of OAUK, please do. Join us. We're always, the more people we have with backgrounds, the more we can kind of respond. We are a responsive organisation to our membership. Thank you all for your time this morning, and I hope you have a good day, and I hope you have a good summer outdoors. Hope the weather clears up, and see you all around there. Thank you very much. Take the best of care.